I will sing unto the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and rider thrown into the sea. I will sing unto the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. Horse and rider thrown into the sea. The Lord my God, my strength, my song, has now become my victory. The Lord my God, my strength, my song, has now become my victory. The Lord is God, and I will praise him. My Father is God, and I will exalt him. The Lord is God, and I will praise him. My Father is God, and I will exalt him. There we are. Good morning. And thank you guys for tuning in once again. My camera person and piano person, Barb, is helping me out today because I can't play the piano. And what's that? Barb says you can see me now. So that was almost an exact rendering of part of what I'm going to read to you today from Exodus 15. And there's a hymn at the end. So if you want to get your hymn books out, it's 149 in the old hymnal. I'm not sure what it is, but it's I love to tell the story. So look that up while I'm doing that, or some of you already know the words, so we're good there. But here it is, Exodus 15, and now Exodus 14, just to back up, is the actual recounting of the story of the parting of the sea. So, Moses goes up and parts the sea, and they go through on dry land, and you guys have watched the Ten Commandments, and you saw that. And a little known fact, though, is that Moses kept those powers, and in heaven, he used to like to play golf with Jesus. And sure enough, they get up to the water trap hole, and Jesus said, Mo, because he called him Mo, he said, Mo, I have been watching TV, and I saw that Tiger Woods uses a 7-iron on this shot. And Moses said, to begin with, Mo, you never call me Mo, but also you always use a 9-iron on this shot, and you do pretty well. And Jesus said, yeah, but Tiger's a good player, and I really want to. I want to try it. I'm going to try the 7-iron, and so he puts the 7-iron up there, and then he bloop right in the water. And Moses walks up and parts the water, walks out there, grabs the ball, puts it back up, and says, now you're going to try the 9-iron? And Jesus said, well, I got to give it one more shot. And Moses closes the water back, and he says, okay, but you're on your own. If you put it in the water, you're just going to have to do a regular, water shot. And he said, okay, but I really have a good feeling about it. And Jesus, bloop, straight in the water. And Moses looks kind of, said, I told you. And so Jesus walks out on the water looking for his ball. And he's standing there in the middle of the water hazard looking for his ball, and a newcomer to heaven walks up. And he taps Moses on the shoulder and sees Jesus out there, and he says, hey, who's that guy think he is? Jesus? And Moses said, no, he thinks he's Tiger Woods. Barb's laughing over there because actually it was originally Arnold Palmer, but, Tiger's a little more current. So, chapter 14 is the recounting, the actual telling the story. And then 15 in the King James is this. Then sang Moses and the children of Israel this song unto the Lord, and spoke, saying, I will sing unto the Lord, for he hath triumphed gloriously, the horse and rider he hath thrown into the sea. The Lord is my strength, my song, and is become my salvation. He is my God, and I will prepare him a habitation, my father's God, and I will exalt him. The Lord is a man of war, the Lord is his name. Pharaoh's chariots and his host has he cast into the sea. His chosen captains are also drowned in the Red Sea. The depths have covered them. They sank into the bottom as a stone. Thy right hand, O Lord, has become glorious in power. Thy right hand, O Lord, has dashed in pieces the enemy. And in greatness of thine excellency thou hast overthrown them that rose up against thee. Thou sentest forth thy wrath, which consumed them as stubble. And with the blast of thy nostrils, you notice what's happening there, the blast of thy nostrils. What happens? What's that referring to, the blast of nostrils? Well, the only time my nostrils blast is when I sneeze and I don't open my mouth quickly enough. And that's nostril blast. So it's sort of a little put down there, is that, God's, sneezing to get the water to part. With the blast of thy nostrils, they gathered together, the floods stood upright as a heap, and the depths were congealed in the hearts of the sea. The enemy said, I will pursue, I will overtake, I will divide the spoil, my lust shall be satisfied upon them. I will draw my sword, my hand will destroy them. Thou didst blow with thy wind, and the sea covered them. They sank as lead in the mighty waters. Who is like unto thee, O Lord, among the gods? Who is like unto thee, glorious in holiness, fearful in praises, doing wonders? Thou stretchedst out thy hand, and the earth swallowed them. Thou in thy mercy hast led forth thy people which thou hast redeemed. Thou hast guided them in thy strength unto the habitation. The people will hear and shall be afraid. Sorrow shall take over the inhabitants of Palestine. Then the dukes of Edom will be amazed, and the mighty men of Moab, trembling, will take hold upon them all. All of the inhabitants of Canaan shall melt away. Fear and dread shall fall upon them. By the greatness of thine arm they shall be as still as a stone, till people shall pass over, O Lord, till people pass over, which thou hast purchased. Thou shalt bring them in, and plant them in the mountain of thine inheritance, in the place, O Lord, which thou hast made for thee to dwell in the sanctuary, O Lord, which thy hand has established. The Lord shall reign forever and ever. The Lord shall, for the horse of the Pharaoh went in with his chariots and with his horsemen into the sea, and the Lord brought out again the waters of the sea upon them. But the children of Israel went on dry land in the midst of the sea. And Miriam, the prophetess, the sister of Aaron, and of Moses, by the way, took a timbrel in her hand, and all the women went out after her with timbrels and with dances. And Miriam answered them, Sing ye to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and rider hath he thrown into the sea. So, you got two parts to the story there. Chapter 14 is the historical recounting of what happened. The chase and the going through the midst of the water and how it all went down. And then chapter 15, which you have a sense that they, took some dramatic license there, and it probably didn't happen exactly right after that because, it took a little while to write it down and do all that. But the important part isn't that it happened right after. The important part is that it was to be a remembrance forever for that. The song was the memorialization of it, and they took, poetic license with it because that wasn't the important part of the story. The important part of the story was that the people of Israel had their backs against the wall, and God had promised to bring them deliverance. And now God had done exactly that. God did what he promised. He brought them deliverance from out of the hand of Pharaoh, from out of Egypt, which, by the way, remember from the previous stories when we were talking about Joseph, that was the going into Egypt initially was their salvation. They were saved from the famine by going into Egypt. So it was a good idea at the time. And, their dirty dealing with Joseph and throwing him in the pit and selling him into slavery and doing all that had worked out that God had brought them to Egypt to save them. And now that great idea had mired them down and turned them into slaves. And now they needed redeeming out of that initially good idea. Which means that not every good idea is a good idea forever. Sometimes we can get so mired down in the good idea that it trips us up in the end. But the fact was that now God had promised redemption to them and had done it, had done exactly what God said he would do. Part one. Part two is that Moses and the people of Israel are now having this as a song of remembrance to have, so that the next generation and down on the line, all the way to us, have a memorial of that, so that the song, in its own way, is as important as the reality of the miracle itself. And I said in its own way because, of course, the miracle had to happen first. And if the people of Israel hadn't been freed, who cares what happens after that? But the fact that it was memorialized in song subsequently meant that all the generations could benefit from the knowledge of God's mighty act at this time of pulling them out of the fire, of setting them free. And in that sense, you and I tell the story again when we reread this, when we, tell it in Sunday school. I remember hearing about it in Sunday school as a kid. As a matter of fact, I think Barbara Van Camp might have been one of the ones that was my Sunday school teacher, telling me about that with the little flannel things, and you put there, and there's the water parting, and they're going through. And so the telling of the story isn't just a way of passing down historical knowledge. It's a way of passing down the reality of God's mighty acts in the lives of God's people, so that it's more than just information. It's more than just, I read it in the history book and now we can, check it off. It's the fact that you and I are recipients of God's grace in the same way. And just as it was Moses' job and Miriam's job to grab the timbrel and not just necessarily to make up a song, but it was their job to memorialize as a witness to God's power in the world. And that telling of the story is a way of building the kingdom. Because that's who God's people are the tellers, the witnesses to what we saw happen. So that, we're not necessarily supposed to be theological deep thinkers. I was never accused of that. We're to be witnesses to what God's done in our own lives. And we're to be singing that song. That's the song we're to be singing, is the story of God's work in our lives and how he's redeemed me. That's the song that we're to sing. And that's to be our witness. Now, we don't have as good a writers as Moses had to do that, so that I don't have a song of my own life. That happens in the normal conversation. And I think that that's what Jesus was talking about when he talked about us being bearers of the good news of his kingdom. Wasn't that we were memorizing 15 theological points that we can argue with somebody, because I don't think argument's what brings people into the kingdom. It's living God's word and witnessing to what we ourselves have experienced and have lived. and are willing to share. And in that way, not only is the kingdom expanded, but we, our own part of it, our own sense of being within the kingdom, is further cemented. Because that's the other reason that Moses was singing the song and that Miriam was singing the song, was to remind the people of God's mighty acts. Now, you know the rest of the story, and we're going to read it here in subsequent weeks, but that they're going to need that remembrance. There were hard times ahead for them. This high moment in their life wasn't the end of their struggle. In some ways, it was just the beginning. And that it was important for them to be able to recount this mighty act of God to give them hope through the hard times that they were going to be suffering in the future. And I don't know that Moses knew all of the hard times. God knew that they would need this to hold on to. And that was going to be important in their lives. And it's important in our lives that when we can recount God's faithfulness day by day, week by week, year by year, that not only spreads our witness beyond ourselves, beyond the four walls of our own sanctuary, but it also helps give us continued hope that we can pull ourselves through the hard times, like not being able to come to church, like having to lock ourselves up and bear up under some adversity. And it's the remembrance that God had brought us through hard times, sad times, but difficult times, and that he helped us to be triumphant in that way. Well, that's pretty important. And it's pretty cool that God invites us to be his people in that way and to be bearers of his witness to others. And you can see, partly, they were singing to themselves. They were singing to remind themselves, so that we're witnesses to those around us and to ourselves to remind us of God's mighty acts. And in that way, it's important for us to continue to tell the story. And that's what, and my piano player is going to come back here in just a sec. And that's what we're going to sing is just verse 1 of I Love to Tell the Story. And there it is. Thank you guys. Thank you for your prayers and ongoing concern. I certainly appreciate it. And thank you for your cards and letters. Please keep them coming. Love you guys. I love to tell the story of unseen things above, of Jesus and his glory, of Jesus and his love. I love to tell the story because I know 'tis true. It satisfies my longing as nothing else can do. I love to tell the story, will be my theme in glory, to tell the old story of Jesus and his love. Thank you guys. Have a good week.